Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Common Council meeting. Roll call, please.
Fire.
Here.
Facial.
Here.
Rosendich.
Here.
Argander.
Here.
Wagner. Here. Witzel.
Here.
Fisher.
Here.
Spiros. Budke.
Here.
Hendler.
Here.
Thank you. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 3, public comment. At this time, the mayor will recognize members of the public who have indicated their desire to address the council. Upon recognition by the mayor, persons may address the council first stating their name and address. Council may take action on emergency matters introduced by members of the public. Anyone from the public wish to address the council? Please, sir, go to the podium and state your name and address for the record. Yep.
Good evening. My name is Steve Liu. I live at 1313 East 26th here in Marshfield. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Barg, Common Council members. I've been a lifelong city resident and in June 2014 retired from the Marshfield Police Department after 29 plus years service. I started policing in 1977 and never looked back. I didn't choose this career to get rich. Back then you chose a career path because of job security, retirement, but mainly for the love of the job. To the day I retired, I never got up and thought about not going in or hating the work. It was never a thought. Prior to retiring, I had to have both knees replaced. I came back to work for approximately 6 months and made the decision to retire. It was time. I was fortunate. If that would have happened to me today, I would have been fired. Not because I couldn't do the job, but because I couldn't run a timed course. And apparently surgeons don't recommend running or jumping with new body parts. One thing instilled in me in earlier time in policing, slow down and be safe. You're not going to be of any help if you don't arrive safely. They say police fear change. There's a reason for this. Sudden changes in our line of work will get you killed. That's why we don't rush into buildings and rooms, and that's why foot pursuits are more likely to get you injured or killed than any safe outcome. In 36 years of police work, I have never, nor have I ever heard of anyone having to run a predetermined distance in a predetermined time. Never. I had the opportunity to work with many fine officers during my career. One of these exceptional officers was Jared Beauchamp. I found that Jared and I shared many of the same interests, including firearms, shooting, negotiating. Jared also had a natural talent as a firearms armorer. Jared is one that truly loves his profession. The enacted policy resulting in Jared Beauchamp's termination is wrong. If you ask yourself, are you doing the right thing at the right time for all the right reasons? The answer is no. Please consider what's happening here. You are dismissing 20 plus years of talent, knowledge, and common sense for what? 34 seconds. Why is 2 minutes and 15 seconds the magic number? What if someone failed that test by 3 to 6 seconds? What would happen then? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wish to address the council? Please. State your name and address for the record.
My name is Becky Hebner-Lew, and I live at 1313 East 26th Street. I tried to keep my comments brief, but there was a lot of information to cover. My comments refer to the termination of Officer Jared Beauchamp. I understand the termination is on the agenda for the Finance, Budget, and Personnel meeting that is to be held this Thursday in closed session. And I do want to state that I do fear retaliation towards my daughter's school's resource officer, Julie Lou Martinic, with the Marshfield Police Department due to my citizens' comments. But these are my comments. After having worked in management positions my entire career, including human resources, my first thought after hearing about the fit for duty process being implemented by Chief Rick Grams of the Marshfield Police Department was one word: targeting. Interestingly, the name that came to my mind was indeed Officer Jared Beauchamp. Officer Beauchamp was terminated for failing to complete the timed run portion within the fit for duty testing by 34 seconds. He passed all the other requirements. As to not rush to judgment, I started thinking, now a reasonable person can assume fit for duty criteria must be relevant to the job and consistent with necessity of performance. It should also be adjusted for male versus female and with age considerations, which in this day and age is a standard criteria even for the military. I could not confirm either of these reasonable requirements were met. I do have knowledge of 2 female officers failing the testing and being removed from duty or not allowed to return to duty when returning to work after giving birth. We all know that life in law enforcement is a stressful, mentally and physically demanding career that is becoming less desirable every day. No one is arguing that we all want law enforcement to be safe, healthy, and able to perform their jobs. Mandatory schedules of rotating 12-hour shifts with endless seated hours patrolling are the norm. Responses to emergency situations may involve physical altercations. Officers are expected to think, reason, and react with split-second decisions that rarely include running, but mostly using de-escalation skills for desired peaceful outcomes. How was the fit for duty communicated to the department? What documentation exists that it was presented in a punitive way prior to the union agreement? Was feedback sought and compiled from the entire department as to relevance to actual historical scenarios, duties? Does it correspond to actual policy of police officers' response to situations? Is it enforced at one person's discretion? What was the reason for punitive action versus creating and using it as a tool to support officers to achieve goals of physical capabilities and minimize work-related physical hazards? What has been the previous new hire testing and has it been changed at the discretion of the chief? Were department staff requested or required to sign any liability waivers regarding the testing and implementation of physical testing? What relevance is it to the number of workers' compensation claims? How does physical testing impact health insurance costs due to usage? Is it really a lifestyle issue and not a job performance issue? Could permanent shifts be accommodated as needed to improve healthy lifestyles? Are there other in-house positive incentives for healthy lifestyles and support? What does the contracted trainer do other than oversee testing? Has a trainer's contracted services proven to reduce injury? What information does a trainer share with the department? Other departments? HIPAA violations? Was a trainer allowed to travel between departments and meet face-to-face during the COVID-19 pandemic? I found very few answers. I received copies of signed validation from 2 officers. One did not check the box saying it reflects job functions, and the other officer that has resigned, but added comments pertaining to stair testing. Chief Gramza and Assistant Chief Zeps had signed validation forms. 2 officers in a department of 37. 1 officer agreeing with the testing is accurate reflection of job duties with exception. In Chief Gramza's fitness presentation materials, he refers to increased worker compensation claims and overtime budgets inflated due to officer injuries. After filing a request for the information with the City of Marshfield, I cannot confirm the yearly number of workers' compensation claims since 2014, resulting in lost time for the Marshfield Police Department. Being told the City of Marshfield is not in possession of such records. I did receive the number of worker compensation claims resulting in lost time for the Marshfield Utilities Department. Annual testing purpose in part is to, and I quote from the presentation materials, ensure employees are able to physically and safely do the required tasks of the job related to specific component of fitness that theoretically predicts the ability to do the job. Officer Beauchamp was terminated over a theory. There is no documentation in Officer Beauchamp's work history that he was not doing or capable of doing his job. In the time that has passed since his termination, I have heard many testimonials as to his problem-solving skills and positive community interaction, and that he is the one you want to respond. Clearly a comment that would not be routinely made if ever his physical capabilities were in question. What I refer to as social propaganda has been seeded throughout the community. The union wholeheartedly agreed with testing, or that an officer cannot even walk a block, or an officer sits in the squad room eating all the pies that were donated, or that everything was done to help an officer to pass the test. Maliciously spread rumors with no merit. Examples of Facebook comments. One of the comments was that a physician cleared him of a knee injury, and another is, and I quote, "I just wanted to share that he had 3 years to meet the timed requirement of a quarter mile in 2.5 minutes. It's the distance from corner to corner of the high school. He had a free gym membership and allowed to work out during shifts. He had access to a trainer and a dietitian. I just wanted to share the information that was not posted. Thank you for your time. How does the general public know about these details?" The reason for inclusion of running up to the testing was cited as an essential job function. In the job function description I received, the word run is not even listed. In the copy of the job function test, run a quarter mile to respond to emergency, it lists run a quarter mile on treadmill at preferred pace. And to meet that goal, it lists able. One example of communication to the public stated that officers need to run from one end of the Marshfield High School to the other to respond to emergencies, as that is the length of the school is the longest area that an officer would need to respond to in an emergency in Marshfield. First, if an officer has to run that distance, I think they're parked in the wrong spot. And second, an officer would safely clear each area by methodically assessing, or at the very least slowing to assess corners, not running at full speed from one end to the other. From my understanding, officers are trained to only run as fast as they can accurately shoot in an active shooter situation. For example, foot pursuits are typically discouraged because of high potential to danger. Should the point be for a physical test that the officer could run, period, if needed? What exactly are the current foot pursuit and other related policies? How the test was developed lists survey, interview, observations, physiological measurements, and biomechanical analysis. Again, request for documentation was not filled. I did receive some handwritten notes that I can't decipher whether or not this is supposed to be the actual documentation. And this is what it looks like. Now, I don't think that looks like scientific data to me. If physiological measurements and biomechanical analysis were used, why isn't there a separation for gender and age provided in the testing? Few departments across the nation, and none that I am aware of in the state of Wisconsin, have implemented similar testing requirements that can also end in officer termination. Departments that have implemented similar testing have lost lawsuits to the tune of millions of dollars in compensation to terminated officers. Who will want to work for a department knowing that at any time a serious illness or accident could occur and they would lose their career and retirement benefits? And I do say career, as I am sure a termination by a department would make an officer ineligible for hire with any other department. On the other hand, proactive departments have created programs that reward officers for completing levels of fitness. The focus is on simple exercises to combat endless hours of sitting, getting out of a squad car quickly, strengthening lower back muscles to alleviate the issues of heavily weighted duty belts, adjusting to environmental changes and hazards. In other words, they focus on where and how injuries are actually occurring. They also focus on effective altercation techniques to avoid injury, mental health, stress reduction, peer support, importance of departmental trust, and improving morale. A capable, experienced officer has lost his career over an arbitrarily decided time pertaining to a fitness skill that theoretically predicts ability and is rarely needed and is not used for law enforcement currently taught strategies. Officer Beauchamp, the Marshfield Police Department personnel, and the citizens of Marshfield deserve better. And yet the quote at the end of the presentation used to promote the fit for duty is, "Warriors are not always the fastest or the strongest people. Warriors are those that stand between their enemy and all that they love and hold sacred." How ironic. Life is about doing the right thing for the right reason at the right time. Chief Rick Grams is fit for duty, and the termination of Officer Jared Beauchamp are none of those. In closing, it is my feeling that more public and professional outcry over this wrongful termination has not occurred due to strategically spread false information, perceived intimidation, and I assume limitations over city city and public comments, city employee public comments, pardon me. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wish to address the council? Final call, anyone from the public wish to address the council? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment and we'll move on to item D. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the June 9, 2020 regular meeting and June 11, 2020 special meeting? Motion by Mr. Butke. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Fire. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, roll call vote, please.
Fire,
Yes.
Facial,
Yes.
Rosendich,
Yes.
Bargander,
Yes.
Wagner,
Yes.
Witzel,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Budke,
Yes.
Hendler.
Yes.
Thank you. Item E, staff updates, fundraising for the Aquatic Center, presented by Justin Casperson, Parks and Recreation Director.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, everyone. I just want to take this opportunity to make a formal announcement that our Marshfield Outdoor Aquatic Center Fundraising Committee has successfully reached their financial goal. This is a very monumental task in a relatively short amount of time. I cannot be more proud of the committee and the community for coming together to complete the private fundraising campaign. They established an aggressive time frame and schedule, and they were able to accomplish it even during a pandemic. I guess this reinforces the importance of the project and the support it received from the donors. We will continue to fundraise throughout the summer and the winter and throughout the project until its grand opening sometime in hopefully June or July. At this time, though, I would like to recognize those individuals who were part of the fundraising campaign. We have the chairs, Ben Lee, who's here this evening, Cara and Bob McManus. We have a campaign planning committee, Lori Belangio, Julie Daggett, JJ Jensen, Sean Meyer, Stacy Schultz, Claudia Tremarco, and John White Jr. We have a campaign honorary committee, which is Rita Blinker, Sue Decker, Sammy Brock, Dennis and Roberta DeVetter, Ken and Joellen Hyman, Bill and Karen Hocking, Joe and Jenny Maza, Chris and Jody Meyer, Rana Nasser and Camille Torbay, Ken and Jean Swenson, Tom and Bonnie Umhafer, Dr. Jim Weber, Daniel Wheeler, Randy and Mary Jo Schuler Wheeler. I would like to take a moment to recognize these individuals and give them a round of applause for their accomplishments. In closing, I would like to announce that we're going to do our groundbreaking ceremony for the new pool on Wednesday, July 8th at 12 o'clock at the current HEFCO site. You guys will all receive a separate invite personally to come down. If you can make it, that would be great. This is a huge moment in our history. If you haven't noticed, we put a banner up recognizing HEFCO Pool's retirement. After 86 years of dedicated service to the city, we're finally retiring the HEFCO name. And also on July 8th, we hope to unveil the naming rights donor. So thank you.
Justin, if you could stay there for just a second, I'd like to thank the committee for all the hard work that you did. You all did outstanding. And I'd really like to thank all the generous people that donated. I think it's important to know that there was more money donated during COVID than before. So I thought that was incredible. And finally, Justin, you're a rock star. How you did this and how you kept everything together, and you pulled the cart and from city staff and everything, but you did a phenomenal job and you deserve a round of applause too. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
All right, so everybody get your swim gear ready. Item F, Mayor's comments, employee recognition. Christopher Haas of the Police Department, July 6, 2010, 10 years. And I'd like to give just two brief updates. As y'all know, there was a a group of people that get together, myself, the fire chief, the police chief, other city staff, the clinic, United Way, the school district, and we're in MACCI. We're in constant contact every week. Originally, it started off as really as being ready for the pandemic to really hit us hard. It's important to note, one of the things is they started the Marshfield Hope Line. And the Marshfield Hope Line was there, and it got instituted very quickly. Andy Convernon and a whole group of people really did something incredible, and they put it together for people that were in distress to call. And the Hope Line made the decision last week. Originally, when it started, there was a pretty fair number of calls. And as time has gone on, there's been less and less calls. And so they are now to the point where they're putting everything on hold, but they did a phenomenal job. But the other thing I think it's important for everyone here to know is the school district at our last meeting that we were on the other day, this was as of last Thursday, had handed out over 81,000 meals to kids from the time COVID started until then. And I just thought that was incredible. So my hats are off to them. And then today is the first time, or Scott and I are we should have just had one car today, Scott, because we were around a few different ways. We were at a groundbreaking today at SC Swiderski over off of Hume Avenue. And just about a year ago, they started to put up 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments. And they started with, I believe it was 95 units. And they thought the national average they were telling us today is that they rent out 25% in their first year. And they like to do better than that. They wanted to at least hit 40. They're not done with the first phase yet, and they have 93% occupancy, which is right here. And then the other business opening was the first one we've had since the whole COVID thing, Curiosities, down there in the 207 North Central Avenue, down there by Total Body Fitness, brand new business opening up. And so I just think I want to thank all of you at MACCI for what you've done, because you really helped our business community. And I don't think you guys get enough recognition for what you do. You are the glue, and you've done a great job. And you could just feel the optimism out there with our businesses. And I would just like to thank you all very much. And I think it'd be great if we can give them a big round of applause. That's it for me. Item G, any council comments? Comments from the council? Seeing none, check there. We'll go on to item H, reports from commissions, boards, and committees. Any reports from commissions, boards, and committees? Seeing none, we'll go on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to receive and place on file, approving all recommended items in the consent agenda? Is a motion by Mr. Hendler, a second by Mr. Fire. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, roll call vote, please.
Fire.
Yes.
Facial.
Yes.
Rosich.
Yes.
Gander.
Yes.
Wagner. Yes. Witzel.
Yes.
Fisher.
Yes.
Butke.
Yes.
Hendler.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Item K, presentation overview of Visit Marshfield, introduced by Steve Barg, City Administrator, presented by Matt McLean, Marshfield CVB Executive Director.
Thank you, Mayor. And I think you did a nice job a minute ago of recognizing the fine work of MACCI, one of our economic development partners. Well, Visit Marshfield, formerly Marshfield CVB, is another one of those partners that does an outstanding job for our community in so many ways. With tourism and promotion, they work diligently to bring people to this community for a variety of events and activities, and they work with our other partners to try and really get people here to enjoy Marshfield and spend money here. So the city is just finishing up now its 4th year of a 5-year agreement with Visit Marshfield. And as we head into the 5th year, the council has indicated that they'd like to talk with the Visit Marshfield Board of Directors and their executive director about the 5th year as far as negotiating potentially a new agreement going forward after next June. And some of the newer members, especially on the council, have perhaps not had the chance to get to hear from Matt about the things that the Visit Marshfield group does, some of the things they're involved in, the activities, and where their energies go. So I thought it'd be good to have Matt come and give us a little presentation and answer questions that council members and the mayor might have. So with that, I would invite Matt up to the podium.
Thanks, Steve. I made us the podium already.
Good job.
I'm going to go ahead and share a screen, and I'll start a presentation. It is nice seeing faces here. I think I gave a similar presentation about a year ago. I was looking in May, and but I did get a chance to meet a few new faces. I think I hadn't met Quentin formally until today, but I know his wife did, and I think everybody else I've got a chance to meet. So pleasure to see you again. Let's see. Okay. So yeah, let's get going here. So Visit Marshfield is we're doing business as Visit Marshfield right now. We formerly were known as Marshfield Convention and Visitors Bureau, so we still have some legal there, but business as Visit Marshfield. We launched our new brand, Visit Marshfield Made New, this year, January 1st. And I'll just jump into the mission statement of our organization is to attract visitors to Marshfield through marketing, development of attractions, and events to create economic impact. Steve had asked me to talk a little bit about the history of our organization and kind of where we started and where we're going. And so in 1991, there was an ordinance created to collect room tax. And that was split 2% that would go to the city and 2% of what would become the Marshfield Convention and Visitors Bureau. And so there was a position created in 1992 for a tourism director housed in the Marshfield Chamber of Commerce and Industry in partnership with the city. And that was when Marilyn Hardiker was the chamber director, and she hired a Sharon Kern. And then in 1999, a new ordinance was passed raising the room tax from 4% to 6%. And that was labeled to have 70% of that go to the Convention and Visitors Bureau and 30% go to the city. And so in 2012, the end of 2012, Sharon Kern was retiring. And I took over as the director in 2013 in February. And so that was exciting times. And actually, right around that same time, there was some action going on. Excuse me. And we actually, the Convention and Visitors Bureau was formally created as a 501c6 in December of 2012, just shortly before I was hired. And some other activities that happened there is in March of 2016, the state passed a new room tax statute, 660615. And then my organization worked with the city, and we signed a joint entity tourism agreement in June 22nd of that time. And that is where we are in the fourth year of a 5-year agreement. And at that time, too, the room tax was raised from 6 to 8% to kind of catch up with other places in the state where 8% was more the average. So that's kind of around an overview of the history and, ordinances and state stuff. Let me talk a little bit about the staff. Myself, I recently had the pleasure of a promotion to the executive director title. My board gave me that earlier this year. And then I do have a staff mate, Nikki Claude. She's my marketing associate. And so we're just a small team of 2. And then we do have 6 members on our board of directors. You can see their names up there. Mr. Fire is one of our board members sitting on the council. Other things I want to talk about, the affiliations. I'm pleased to be on the City Marshfield Communications Committee. I've just recently been on that for a little less than a year now, I think, and I got to do a meeting last night with Tom and the team, and I'm excited to do that. We definitely both do a lot of communicating and talking about things with the city, so I think it makes great sense. I'm also a member of Destinations Wisconsin, which was formerly known as the Wisconsin Association of Convention and Visitors Bureau. So really, I have about 30 to 40 friends around the state that give best practices. So we kind of have, here's the right things to do, the best ways to spend room tax, this is what we've learned from doing things. So that's kind of my teachers in my school. So I have a lot of industry experts that I talk to all the time. We typically host meetings every 2 months, and then we have conference calls. And so it's a great resource. I'm proud to be a member of it. And also Group Sports Wisconsin, which is very similar. We have about 20 to 25 folks that work with sports and bring tournaments, such as baseball tournaments we've been having in town here, which I'll talk a little bit more later. And I'm also a member of the Marshfield Noon Rotary Club. Talking about some of the partners that we work with, our offices are based in the Chamber of Commerce, MACCI, and so we partner with them very closely. We work together on many different things. Also partner very strongly with Main Street Marshfield and Wenzel Family Plaza. Partner with the city of Marshfield, of course, and also Wood County. I've been on calls, weekly calls of Wood County, talking about COVID recovery and talking to the health department and keeping up with things like that. So that's been great. And also the Wisconsin Department of Tourism is a strong partner. Just want to briefly go over 2019 highlights. We did have a good year, and we typically host a tourism banquet, which I think many of you have attended in the past, that we talk about kind of our year. We kind of get our returns and our numbers and data in May, and kind of when we can celebrate, hey, these are the data and what happened last year. And this year, unfortunately, we didn't have our banquet based on kind of the COVID situation, but I can share some of that data that we would typically talk about there with you tonight. So winter sports hockey, it was a good year in 19 for hockey. So we fund, we give grants to the Hockey Association and work with them on projects, and they bring a lot of visitors to town. Also, same thing with the curling club, Marshfield. We also helped run the Winter Fest, which was a Battersea Game snowshoe and fat tire bike race, and that was at a new location this year. It was at the school forest for the first time. And that went really well. I think we had 3 times as many bike riders as we've ever had, and had about 80 snowshoers. And we had some folks from Chicago all the way come up from our event. And so we had a good traveling group for that. That was in February. We have key signature events that we always help market and promote. So one of those being Dairy Fest last year was one of our big promotions, as well as the state championships of cornhole, which took place at Dairy Fest last year. And summer sports, as I mentioned, baseball tournaments here. We've just hosted 2 tournaments this year. And we had the same tournaments last year, and they went over really well, filled a lot of the hotel rooms, brought a lot of visitors to town. I'll talk about some of the tournaments in 2020 here in a little bit. Again, Hub City Days is a key signature event that we helped market and promote last year, as well as the Central Wisconsin State Fair and the National Bull Riders Championships, which is hosted a couple weeks after the fair too. And Maple Fall Fest, of course, that is the one event that we are kind of in charge of and run in September. As well as Oktoberfest at the Plaza, we were involved with the marketing and planning for that as well. I apologize, I think some of the fonts got changed on the slideshow when we loaded into Zoom here, so there's typos here or there. And again, too, Winter Wonderland, we're a proud sponsor of Winter Wonderland, and also market and promote that as it's one of the top attractions in a slower time for us in November, December. We've also really kind of taken on where we want to really promote attractions, not just events, and especially now with COVID, not a lot of events happening, of course. So the Wenzel Family Plaza, I sit on the committee as a vice chair for the Wenzel Family Plaza Committee. And so we really are involved a lot in the planning of that and helping fund that as well. Jurassic Park is a treasure. We've actually started a video series with Clyde and working on that right now. And he gets over 15,000 visitors a year. And he's been open pretty much the whole time here. It closed down during the Save at Home, but has been open and welcoming guests and visitors. So definitely an attraction we talk a lot about. And of course, we can't forget Wildwood Zoo. It's a treasure again as well. Got Lindsay and Boda fighting there with some folks watching along. So again, we talk a lot about the zoo, and it's definitely a treasure, and visitors love it. I won't go through this whole list, but we gave out $20,300 in grants to different organizations in 2019. You can see some of those as the Central Wisconsin State Fair, the Draft Horse Show, Baseball Association, Hub City Days, Carriage Display for there. Now I'm going to jump into just some statistics, and social media is huge for us. Right now, we have 16,000, almost 17,000 followers. And with the CVB in Wisconsin Rapids, I think has about 3,000, Moss has about 3,000. So we have a huge audience that we talk to on a daily basis. And that has grown almost over 3,400 from last year at this time. So we continue to grow that and have a conversation with people that are interested in visiting Marshfield. We've also expanded to Instagram. It's a little different animal. It is used a lot by younger folks here, but we've grown that from 200 followers to 656 followers. It's not quite as easy to grow as Facebook. You can't quite run as many promotions and get as easy an ads, but it's a very visual content, and the people that are following this are really engaged. And so we've seen some positive momentum from that driving visitors. Next up, I want to talk about the brand that we launched, Visit Marshfield Made New. So we did receive grant from the State Department of Tourism for $35,000 to help us launch this brand. And we launched it January 1st. And our website here, you can see 100% growth. We had twice as many people see our site in January and February of this year as we did last year. And so it was huge. So we had over 23,000 page views in January and February versus 11,000 the previous year. And we also have really pushed an email newsletter. We had about 2,500 followers in 2017. Currently, it stands at 9,708 of people that are interested in visiting and coming to Marshfield. And so they receive a monthly newsletter of things happening and what's going on and why you should come visit. Again, grants received. Again, I apologize, the slideshow got a little messed up here. But we've, during my tenure, we've had over $150,000 of grant dollars through the State Department of Tourism that we've got. Through some of the research I did, I think that's more than doubled in the previous 20 years. And then we've also contributed towards projects that are tourism attractions in town. We've been heavily invested in the Wenzel Family Plaza, donated to the Bear exhibit, as well as the Aquatic Center, which I was excited to hear about that. That's a nice word. Let me talk about some of the data that we get from the State Department of Tourism. And so this is from a group called the Tourism Economics. So they're a think tank that basically studies data. And so it's a third party that the state hires to collect this. And so 2019, there was $102 million of direct visitor spending in Wood County. And that's almost a 4% increase over 2008. So it's growing, and Marshfield being one of the main population centers is also with the most hotel rooms in Wood County is a main driver of that. Next up, total business sales, again, rose almost 4% to $197 million. And then also taxes, those rose just over 3%. So $12.4 million were generated by visitors coming to Wood County. And again, this activity supports 2,292 jobs. Again, that was an increase of almost 4% from 18 to 19. So there's a lot of folks that work in the economy, and there's a lot of those folks that have been struggling right now. Here's some data that I presented to the Economic Development Board, working with Josh, showing the room tax collections overall, the city and the CVB portions, Visit Marshfield portions together. In kind of my tenure here, there's been over about $2.7 million collected, and it's raised every year. And you can see the estimated overnight visitor impacts. That has gone up as well. The only glitch was in 2018, we had a banner year because of these big three events. We spent over 3 years planning and working with Wood County Farm Tech Days, Fur Takers of America, and the State Square and Round Dance. So that was kind of our big convention year. And so if you go back here, you can see that the room tax was down a little less than 3% from 2018 to 2019. But again, numbers have been going up, more visitors coming, spending more money. And now just talk kind of where we're at and what we're doing now. So we are actually in the midst of the Best of Marshfield campaign. And so we've been getting to do this for pretty much my tenure here. And we had over 1,000 people vote on the first day. It started last week, and it's going until the 28th. So if you haven't voted yet, please do. It's a partnership with Hub City Times, and so you can go to visitmarshfield.com or hubcitytimes.com or do paper ballots in the paper. And really, we're trying to showcase local business, trying to get everybody helped up. We typically run the program in May. We felt with the economy reopening kind of in June, we wanted to push forward with, trying to support local business, showcase the best restaurants. And it's a thing of, this is the secret the visitors can tell. Residents can tell visitors, like, hey, did you know that this won best pizza, this won best burger? And these are, we had over 2,000 people vote for this. So that's going on right now. As I mentioned, we launched our new brand, Visit Marshfield Made New. We have Veterans Parkway. We have the Marshfield Made New banners. There's also 2 billboards up, one on Highway 29 and one on Highway 39. So if you do some traveling there, it says turn here to go to Marshfield. So we're getting some impressions off of those to get Marshfield on the map when we're not on, the main highway. Some positive news. The year started out, hotel occupancy was up 10% in January and February. And then March started strong as well. And of course, we all know what happened in the middle of March. The COVID outbreak came. And so we did just receive the first room tax collection from Q1. And it was down about 10.7% from last year, which actually was not bad compared to how March really dropped off in the middle. So, and I think there were a couple of hotels that hadn't reported, so that might go up a little bit. But we are projecting about 70% reduction in room tax collection for the rest of the year, just because hotel occupancy is really, it's down. It's down. It's, one of the hardest hit sectors based on COVID happening now. As I mentioned, we had double the web traffic in January and February. And really when this thing hit March, it dropped our numbers quite a bit. We still developed a new website and got some pretty decent traction, but it went down. And hotel partners told me 50 to 70% of their occupancy have been down from March through June. I want to try to spin this positive here to end a little bit. I was trying to think of what can I do to help my hotel partners, calling them and, I guess, okay, they're laying off people, things are going bad. I just said, I'm going to go buy a bunch of donuts and go deliver. So, I went and visited about half a dozen hotel partners and just said, hey, here's some donuts. Are you okay? And brought them into the hotels. I think it was maybe the week of the stay-at-home orders. So I wanted to go out and do that. You can see a little business card and from your friends at Visit Marshfield. And then, some other positive things going on is the Hampton Inn. I think many of you in this room were with me. It was -10 below, coldest day in winter, and we did the groundbreaking. And then here's a picture from not too long after that. You can see the tower of the elevators going up. And then this snapshot was just from a day or two ago, where it's the exterior is pretty much done. They're moving forward. I touched base with the sales manager, and they have a GM. And every few weeks, kind of, how are things going? They're asking me when's the clinic kind of opening back up and when they're seeing where their patients. And so I think they're still on track to do that. And, they really saw the positive results from 2017-18 of, Marshfield's growing. We're getting more visitors coming in. So they wanted to build a new hotel. And I did also, when I drove by, they have R&R flooring supply. I think got a Spencer doing the flooring, Total Electric from Marshfield so using local vendors to do a lot of the construction and pieces to that. So that's nice to see. Other things too is we did have 2 big events that we were working really hard on for April of this year. They did get postponed and moved to next year, but we had 400 kids sign up for gymnastics in April. And unfortunately, they couldn't do it at the high school. And so but that's scheduled for next April, as well as a Rural Partners Summit, which I think, Bob, you were on the docket to come speak to it. But unfortunately, we'll get you on the docket for next year, as they're going to be coming back, bringing a few hundred leaders from rural Wisconsin to talk about best practices. And then a couple other pieces of good news. We did just receive $39,500 for a new GEM grant to run a Central Wisconsin promotion. And so we're launching in the next couple weeks Play Outdoors in Central Wisconsin. And I've kind of led the charge with folks from Wisconsin Rapids and Stevens Point, where we're doing a regional co-op. And for every dollar that we spend on marketing, the state will give us $3 towards this promotion. So altogether, we're going to have about a $100,000 marketing promotion of Play Outdoors in Central Wisconsin, come do the trails, come do biking, hiking, golfing. And so we're excited. That's, I think, the biggest thing we can do to help rebound the economy with COVID is getting people out to safe social distance sports and activities. And then actually, one thing that didn't make my slideshow is I just heard the news, and I want to thank Justin with the Parks and Rec. We are having a new baseball tournament July 10th through the 12th. Small town baseball is coming back again. So they're here this weekend and then coming back again with another 30 teams. They had to move their location. They chose Marshfield to come back. So we'll fill the hotels up again and just got that news today. So anyway, thank you guys for your time. I hope it wasn't too long. I would like to open up to questions.
Questions for Matt? Mr. Budke.
Matt, I think you and your staff and your board is just doing an amazing job. Every year I seem to find more things that you're into. And if anybody's driving around, especially the last couple weekends with Oak Avenue, to see cars like you wouldn't believe on those baseball fields. I know Mike and I really pushed before Justin was here to get those Little League fields done there. And I think I can speak for him. Our proudest thing is to see that everything's being used there. And I know you guys are doing a lot of other things, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Tom. Yeah, I forgot to mention too that I did connect the tournament organizers with the Wood County Health Department, and they are doing social distancing. I think one thing I noticed, instead of them shaking hands at the end of the games, they tip their hats. And so they are being safe, as safe as it can be, and baseball is a fairly distant sport. So trying to connect those people with how to do it safe in this time.
Any other questions? Seeing none. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Item L, request to approve resolution number 2020-25, permit and exception to section 9-461 of the Marshfield Municipal Code with respect to open container restrictions for the MACCI PROW Crawl on Saturday, June 27th, presented by Rick Ramsey, Police Chief.
Thanks, Mayor. What you have in front of you is a request to approve the resolution in front of you. This resolution, you have the power to allow open containers in the downtown area outlined in this resolution. In 2019, 5 of these events were approved by this body. Those events being United Way Wine Walk, Hub City Days, Central Wisconsin State Fair, Main Street Marshfield Beer Walk, and the Main Street Marshfield Holiday Wine Walk. The reason for this resolution that we bring forth is the goal of reducing the dangers of binge drinking around events such as these. This event will be taking place on this coming Saturday through MACCI. It is for the PROW event. It is at from 11 to 5. I had asked that the time frame be from 11 to 5:30 just to allow people to finish up the event. IDs will be checked at registration, and there will also be hand stamping or wristbanding occurring. The area that this would be covering, although the event is citywide, would be from roughly Veterans to 9th, or the 100 to 900 block of South Central, and then from Maple to Chestnut, so just that downtown area. And the event will be monitored by on-duty police staff. I had attached section 946 of our ordinance. Section 2 of that says the council may at its discretion permit exemptions to the provision under sub 1, which is the no open containers, by resolution specifying the time, place, and any limitations as described through conduct. Be happy to answer any questions you have. Otherwise, I would look to have this event, this resolution approved for the MACCI PROW Crawl from the 100 to 900 blocks of South Central Avenue, Chestnut to Maple, on Saturday, June 27th from 11 to 5:30.
All right, motion to approve resolution number 2020-25, motion by Mr. Fire, second by Mr. Fisher. Any discussion? Mr. Witzel.
Thank you. This is for an event in 4 days?
Correct.
Is there a reason why it's coming so late to us?
I believe that we were working with MACCI and the number of businesses that were going to be taking place hadn't confirmed yet, so we weren't exactly sure. One of the things we have to actually say is, we have to define the place or the space of where we allow the open containers to take place. And with some of the late entries, we really didn't have a determined location. So once those came in, we outlined that area.
Okay.
Normally it would be to you probably 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I've seen information out to the public on this, advertisements and such. If this were not to pass, how is that going to impact this event that's already being advertised, that's already underway? Again, it brings back the question of this very late request for a 4-day away event.
The event would still take place. You just wouldn't be able to carry your open beverage from one location to the next. You'd have to consume it at the location that you were at, that location that is licensed, and then move on to the next location.
Is the serving going to be happening indoors or out?
Indoors? Okay, indoors.
So then how does the social distancing take place during that event, during the serving indoors?
Probably similar to any other, I guess, establishment currently.
I would imagine their expectation is that there's going to be a larger crowd involved in this particular event.
I'm not sure of the registration amount right now.
We're in
Okay.
actually doing registration. So we're allowing. So they'll actually out. And there's no particular problem.
No further questions.
Any further questions? Seeing no further questions, roll call vote, please.
Handler?
Yes.
Budke?
Yes.
Fisher?
Yes.
Witzel?
Yes.
Wagner? Barkander?
Yes.
Rosendich?
Yes.
Paschal?
Yes.
And Fire.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. That motion carries. Item M, discussion and possible conceptual approval of the 2021-2025 Capital Improvement Program CIP, presented by Dan Kinect, Director of Public Works.
Yeah, hi, Mayor. This is Steve. I'll be taking it. Dan had a personal issue he needed to attend to tonight, so he won't be with us. I've obviously been part of the discussion with him in respect to following up on the June 11th council meeting, the special meeting on the CIP. So I'll kind of walk through just the highlights of Dan's memo and then take any questions you might have. But if you recall, as we got down near the end of that special meeting on June 11th, a couple things were discussed. One was the high level of borrowing in 2021 at $6.1 million. And at that point, Councilmember Wagner raised the idea that perhaps we look at cutting that by 10%, which would be roughly $600,000. I feel like I let the mayor and the council down in that meeting a bit because I knew, I don't know if we even mentioned it during the meeting, but that the $3 million borrowing for the new aquatic center was going to happen in 2020 now with your recent approval, so step that project up rather than 2021, which would immediately reduce that borrowing for 2021 from 6.1 million down to 3.1 million. The other issue that factored in, that was from a motion you made earlier in the meeting and approved, and that was to move the East 17th Street project over by the fairgrounds up from 2023 to 2021. So that added another almost $1.1 million to the 2021 amount. So, I don't really feel like I sorted those things out in front of you as we wrapped up on June 11th, but we're going to walk through it now and look at our various options. So first of all, one scenario would be to look at reducing the long-term debt by $600,000, which was the motion. But if you start out with the $6.1 million of proposed debt for 2021, take out the $3 million for the aquatic center, that leaves you with $3.1 million. And then we subtract $600,000 in cuts to get to $2.5 million. Add the $1,076,000 back for the East 17th Street project, and that would make our goal $3.576 million for 2021. And looking at how that might be achieved, the first thing that came up, and that is something that Dan and I had talked about once before as being possible, we've had slated for 2021 a project of doing a water main work on Lincoln between Ives and McMillan. That project would serve two functions. One, it would get water service up into that area on the east side where it doesn't exist now. But secondarily, there's been talk for a while about possible development occurring on the west side of Lincoln in that area. And it was thought, at least at one time, a year or two ago, that a property owner might want to do a subdivision for housing, and that would be the vehicle needed to make it possible, that added infrastructure. But looking at things right now, neither of those seems to be pressing. So our part of our proposal would be to eliminate that project, a capital improvement fund project, a 401 fund of $311,000, and be able to reallocate or repurpose those monies to another capital project in the plan. The remaining $289,000 could be reduced by cutting back the asphalt paving program a little bit. Right now that's slated for a little over $1.8 million in 2021, so that would be reduced to closer to $1.5 million. And the possibility of increasing it then in 2023 to make up the difference. We really want to try and do as much asphalt paving, and I know the council doesn't want to see that cut to any great degree, because that's really the, short of reconstructions, that's the real key work we do to keep up our roads. And I know that we've heard loud and clear from constituents over the years that street work is imperative to what they want to see as far as their priorities. So there's in Dan's memo, you'll see what that would look like, that 5-year plan under scenario 1. The other option, scenario 2, would be to reduce it by 10% from the $3.1 million. So in other words, take off the $3 million for the aquatic center. So we're looking at $3.1 million of borrowing, and suggest that your motion could be intended to mean take $310,000 off, 10% of what would have been the revised amount without the aquatic center. So that would bring us down to $2.79 million. Again, add back a little over $1 million for the East 17th Street project, and you'd be at $3.866 million of long-term borrowing for 2021. In that scenario, we would plan to take the $310,000 from that water main project that I mentioned and repurpose it for street work or other uses within the plan as the funding source. And Dan shows in his memo as well on page 3 what that borrowing scenario would look like. Under both of these, we would be lower than would be otherwise, and we'd be lower than we've been in past years. Dan asked Ron Allman, our finance director, to run the 5-year borrowing we've done for the past 5 years, from 2016 through 2020, and it's noticeably higher. In fact, the average during those 4 years is $4.25 million, and that's without the city hall and the pool project. That's just the regular streets, parks, infrastructure improvements that we've done. So this would be an average of closer to $3.5 million. And that's in keeping with our 5-year financial plan that we had worked with Ellers. Our goal for this 5-year plan was to do $3.1 million in borrowing in 2021, and then ramp up by $100,000 per year to $3.5 million in 2025. So we are slightly over that. We really would need to adjust the 3rd year, which we knew we had to before. But other than that, we're considerably lower than previous years. In fact, our goals last year for the CIP were $3.7 million per year. So we've come down in respect to what we're being told by our financial advisor. And again, our goal is to make sure that we're absolutely paying more in principal every year than we're borrowing in new debt. So with that in mind, the staff has looked at this. And oh, by the way, I have a memo in the packet as well. Hopefully you saw in the back part of this item. And that goes to the vehicle and equipment replacement issue that the council raised on June 11th. And it's a really, really good question. I think I addressed it a little bit at that time. The fact is that, we have replacement schedules. You buy a vehicle or a piece of equipment, it's got a life of 7 years or 10 years. Are we automatically just replacing it when that time comes? So it's been 10 years, well, we're going to replace it, whether it has more useful life or not. And, I would have a concern about that as well. Now, 2 pieces on that contained in my memo. The first piece is that, and I maybe mentioned it back on June 11th, with streets and parks and some of the other departments, these projects are done through an internal service fund. So in other words, we buy a piece of equipment in 2021, the department involved has to start setting aside money for that piece of equipment into this fund. So in 2031 or 2033 or whatever that time comes, monies have been set aside for the replacement. That's what's so great about this fund. And we can usually fund about $650,000 a year in replacement based upon the monies that have been paid in. So if you look at what I put in the packet, you see what Dean Schiller, our street superintendent last year, who did this 701 report, he shows the breakdown of each of these items, how old it is, but not just how old it is, but how many miles on it, how much wear and tear, what's the maintenance history of it, making the case that if we are trying to replace something, it's not just because it's 7 years old or 10 years old and meets the manufacturer's life. It's because its time has come to replace it for other reasons. I think that Mike Winch did this before, as I recall, and Chris Hawley, our new street superintendent, I believe is committed to doing that in the future. We want to show what these monies are being spent for and that they're being spent for items that truly do need to be replaced. On the public safety side with police and fire, they don't have an equipment replacement fund, such as an internal service fund. And that is a little bit problematic. In the case of PD, they replace squad cars every year, and pretty much the same with investigator cars. Fire less often, but their replacements are fairly regular, and there is no fund at this point that's being paid into. We looked at this with Ron Allman and others and tried to see if it's possible to establish a vehicle and equipment replacement fund for the public safety departments. Because of the frequency of their purchases and some of the things that go on in those departments, it's harder to do that than for a backhoe or some other things that have a much longer useful life. So anyway, I've communicated now with both the fire and police chiefs and the Fire and Police Commission Chair, Randy Gershman, and we've agreed that we're going to connect with a Zoom meeting or an in-person meeting and start talking about how we can make sure that we're not replacing vehicles and equipment until we need to. Again, just because the manufacturer's suggested life is over. I know that I'm driving 2 vehicles at my own home. Probably see them if you see them in the parking lot that are, much older and they have very low maintenance problems. So I'm continuing to use them and they're valuable to me. And we want to make sure that we're making best use of our resources at City Hall too. So going back to where I started, the real reason we wanted to get this in front of you now rather than in early July, like we talked at the end of the June 11th council meeting, is because the council doesn't see it yet, but the budgeting process is really starting right now for staff. We had a kickoff meeting on June 18th, and people like Tom Turchi, the city engineer, and others really need to start knowing what and how much of those projects that they're doing so they can start allocating staff costs and really putting the numbers to paper during the month of July to get these budgets turned in. The budgets by staff leaders must be turned in by late in July. So we'd like to see whether you pick scenario 2, which we would recommend, or scenario 1 or some other option that you would come up with. We'd really like to see conceptual approval tonight. If we need to then have the staff members, tweak the numbers and bring back a final version, that'll be fine. And we can get that formally approved in July if you'd like. But we'd like to walk out of this meeting tonight knowing where you are comfortable having the money spent, especially for 2021.
Thank you. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question and then I'm going to make a comment if I can. The question is, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the council approved going out to bid for the aquatic center, but did not officially approve the funding. I believe that was Alderman Witzel's motion, and he sold me on that motion. So I just want to make sure, because I heard a comment from you, Steve, that we are doing the project in 2020, and I want some clarification because I don't believe the council has actually approved to actually do the funding. So if you could answer that, please.
Well, yeah, you make a good point. When Ron prepares the borrowing resolution, which he's going to be doing here shortly, and we go out to borrow the monies for streets and park improvements and building upgrades, that type of thing. We look at what appears to need to be done. In fact, sometimes we think we're going to do something in 2020 that gets taken off the list. And I think we might have that this year, perhaps with the housing incentive. We don't have a project right now. But based upon your recent actions in the past 3 or 4 weeks, it's been our impression that we would be going ahead with the project. And as a result, the borrowing would be more likely to be needed in 2020 rather than 21 to be able to begin to make contractor payments. But yes, I believe you probably do need to have, certainly you have to approve a bid, which you haven't seen yet because we only decided now to go out for bids.
Yeah, I just want to clarify because when I heard that statement, I was a little concerned because technically, and I can understand the impression, and I probably will support it if we move it to 2020 now that there's money being raised, but technically the council has not approved the funding, so I just think we should be careful that we don't get ahead of the council. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to clarify, later this summer, you will be asked, if this keeps moving down the road, to approve the borrowing resolution. And again, that's also for, street resurfacing and park improvements and, roof repairs and those kind of things, the capital projects that you have on your list, as you do every year. But these are the 2020 ones that were given approval last year. And if it turns out we borrow $3 million for the aquatic center and ultimately the project doesn't go forward for whatever reason, we would have to deal with the fact that we'd either, be finding a way to deal with that with the borrowing, the bond issue, whether it's finding a way to repurpose the money that's acceptable or or something. I mean, we can't just spend those monies on staff salaries and other things. So we'd be pretty well hands tied to do anything else with it, unless that project were to move forward at some point.
And I can address that. And of course, you asked that question as soon as I walk away from my laptop, but, and I'll verify, but the budget resolution, the borrowing resolution we'll come forward with, we'll have it in. It was approved in the 2020 budget, $3 million in borrowing. And I think maybe we lost sight of that because it seemed, until these big donors came through, it seemed likely it was going to fall to 2021, but it is approved in the 2020 budget. So it'll be on the borrowing resolution, as such, when I get it together in a couple weeks here.
Thank you. Mr. Wagner.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Dan Connect, when he was formulating this, asked me to come up because he wanted to make sure he was living up to both the spirit and the intent of the motion that was unanimously passed by the council, and he asked me to sit down and talk about this. But I honestly didn't expect that he was going to be able to do it with just basically messing with two projects, which is what he did. But it would work out rather well to do that. I was trying, well, Ron's leaving the room, and I needed to ask him a question. Okay, now I'll just wing it until he gets back. But anyway, the point was that it's not just the amount of money we're saving on the not borrowing during that year, the $600,000. It's what the principal and interest on that $600,000 would be in 10 years from now. And that's what we're really saving the people of Marshfield by doing that. I personally liked the scenario that took out 10% with the pool money still in there, because I think if I'm recalling that correctly, let me flip it down here real quick. It was the $3.5 million I thought was that we would have left in borrowing. It would be similar to what our normal operations would be. And it would bring us back in line with that. So I didn't have any problems with the first scenario at all. The second scenario, I'm not quite as thrilled with, but I think the first one worked out pretty well. The other thing that I talked to Dan about, and I think the council needs to know about, is that the intention isn't that, and you notice that Dan put in the memo that he's looking for conceptual agreement on this. He's not looking for hard commitment to it, but if that's the concept you want to do, let's go ahead with it. It will not preclude any members of the council at the final hearing on the CIP to go line by line and remove their favorite bugaboos in the budget itself. I know there are people who want to take stuff out of various things, and Steve did mention that the equipment fund was one that people were talking about, or actually the vehicle replacement. Just by fortune today, the finance office released the audited the final year-end figures for all city accounts. And I had a lot of fun going through those today and enjoyed it. And I found that Dan's remark that the vehicle replacement fund was healthy was an understatement. I think the existing balance available is somewhere in the vicinity of $2 million.
Yeah.
And we're getting and we're putting $650,000 into it this year. And that is, and we put $650,000 into it. Dan did give me the admonition as his face turned white that it was dangerous to do that. But at the same time, it's something that budget is getting built up enough where we might be able to take some leeway and maybe do some reductions there too. But just by approving the concept here today, you're not doing that to the equipment budget. You're not doing anything to any other of the line items that Dan would show, and that would bring us down to the $3.5 million or so of our normal borrowing plan. So that's all. I'm going to support the scenario one, and I don't know how everybody else feels about it. Say the council president has some, he's stroking his beard, which scares me. So anyway, but I'll yield the floor to him. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Witzel. I'll really be glad when we get back to the voting thing, because trying to do this with the stuff is just not as fun. Mr. Butke.
Ron, with the pool money coming out of 2020, and Justin can jump in this too. I mean, if we start, it's not going to be done this fall, from what I understand. It's going to be. So where I'm going with this, could we split the funding to the next couple of years? Our part of it?
Sure. You know, Justin and I, we looked at a lot of scenarios. The difficult part of timing the pool is that the donation part, we don't have a set schedule. You know, it's pledged, it can be over 5 years, those kind of things. So we have to come up with kind of a range of things. So we think it's prudent to borrow the $3 million now, and then at the next year's borrowing, we'll have a much better handle on how the donations are coming in and what the timing of those cash flows are. And then the second part of it, we would look at either one of two things: either the pledges are sufficient enough, or we might have to short-term borrow for that half of it, depending on how it comes in. So it's a tougher one to time than a normal project.
Where I'm going with this is I'm not happy with cutting back on the overlay project. I don't want that going away. And if we could do half and half, we could keep it in there possibly, you know, and it doesn't have to be, you know, half of the $3 million, exactly whatever we figure. But then we could keep up with the overlay project, unless you're going to tell me in 2021, we're going to double that so we can do what we should have done or in 22. So we are going to catch up to what we should have done in 21. I'm not comfortable going back on the roads.
I would just like to make a comment to that. One thing that Dan brought up, and this is where, you know, I really appreciate what city staff does. They labor over this stuff daily. And when they give their recommendation, I don't think that they're just putting together a computer program. They've thought about this. And if we go in and we make the same mistake, I think that past councils have done, of pushing off more road work, doing the exact opposite of what our constituents tell us. Our constituents tell us the roads are not good. So then what happens is per Dan and per Tom, if you brush that off, then the condition gets worse. Do we really want to do that? Do we continue to want to make the same mistake? I think option number 2 is far better from that. I just don't think coming out, taking money out of the roads is very good. But Ron, I do want to clear something from Mr. Fisher's point of view. That $3 million, the borrowing was already approved by the council, correct?
Correct. I ran back to my office. It's in the 2020 budget in the 401 fund for $3 million in borrowing.
Yep. And so what we're looking at is the final borrowing once we get the bids in. We're not looking at that's not where we're looking to go down and have any reduction or anything like that.
So we borrow, the plan is we borrow $3 million this year. And looking at the estimated expenditure schedule, that gets us through most of it. Okay. And then next year's borrowing cycle, which will be earlier, and I can explain why we waited a little bit longer this year. Next year, the borrowing cycle will be a little bit earlier, and we'll see how the pledges are coming in. Right. And there is a possibility we would have to short-term borrow. You know, if a lot of these pledges are 5 years, we might have to temporary borrow till they come in.
Sure. Okay. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I appreciate the clarification. And I think what's going to happen in the future is when motions are made, we're going to have to be very careful to fully understand what we're voting on then, because I vividly remember a motion from Alderman Witzel because he sold me. I was on the fence. I could have teetered either way, and the motion was to, and I remember essentially the verbiage, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, but that we would go out to bid. But I remember him saying we're not committed to the funding. So if that's my mistake, that's fine. But I do believe as a council, we need to be very careful to understand every vote that we are making and every motion that is made and the verbiage, because it led to an impression for me that we could go out to bid. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think in theory, we could still vote to not approve the funding at any time. So even though I respect the comments that are made, we don't have to approve the funding up until the very bitter end. So again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we could stop that funding at any time.
And at what purpose? When the motion was made, the funding was already approved for that. When the motion was made and clarified, it was that we go out to bid before we had all the money in. And the council's discretion at that time was that obviously we needed to get the more funding to come in. But it was never stated by Mr. Witzel or anybody that not doing the project would be even considered. Mr. Witzel.
Thank you. I have comments, questions, and I guess clarifications to complete here. First, I'll touch on this borrowing thing. When I had asked and made the motion, the intent was to go out to bid now. The idea was that if the bids weren't coming in the way we expected, and if the fundraising wasn't accomplished, that we could always wait and look at bidding at a more opportune time. Saying more opportune meaning that it's my understanding that traditionally, non-COVID year, traditionally good bids are found in the fall, late winter, as people are, early winter, as people are starting to book out their following year projects. But in this case, we wanted to see if indeed what we were being told that this was a prime time because people didn't have full summers of construction, that we were going to get good bids. I said, let's try it. Let's test the waters. Let's see what's happening. And if the bids are great, let's go for it. If the bids aren't good, let's wait until the fall. Now, the commitment from this body a couple of years ago, and I realize not everybody here facing me or looking at me was present at that time, but the commitment that we made as a council was that we would match the fundraising up to $3 million. And so we are committed to $3 million. The question really lies in when. When are we committed to that $3 million? Are we getting good bids? Are we going to approve those bids now? Are we going to go ahead and do it? Or are we going to wait and see if better bids come in early winter as we start to look at next construction season? A big part of what we did with this whole COVID situation was not reopen the pool. And there was a lot of reason for that. I know that there's a lot of things happening recently that I'm being informed of by the minute practically, that the concerns or the attempts to prevent gatherings and all sorts of other things are sort of going by the wayside. But the concept was that was going to be a tremendous amount of work, a tremendous amount of cleaning, extra staff, lower census, if you will, of the pool usage. There was going to be a significant change to how that pool was going to happen. So why not close? And if we can get great bids, and let's do it. And if we can break ground with the great bids and get it done by next summer, let's do it. Because then the businesses that are impacted by the pool being closed will be less impacted, because instead of us having a very thin season this year, followed by a no season next year, we have a no season this year with a tremendous, unbelievable, record-breaking season next year on a much quicker scale. So that was the intent. And yes, I did say we would have the opportunity to look at those bids to say, and we weren't committing to going ahead and doing it, but if those bids came in favorably, we should go for it. But I'm still waiting to see what those bids look like. And I know that Justin's working on it. I know that construction management is working on it. I know that that work is underway, and I'm excited and looking forward to how those things are coming in. But that's the clarification on that. Couple of other things. I sort of feel a little bit like a shell game here where things are getting shifted around. And hey, look at how much we're saving because we're not borrowing $3 million for the pool, but we're actually going to borrow more because now we have these other things. And I understand that there's some concern with the deferring of a mill in place and with asphalt overlay. But I know that we also had the conversation that very first night of CIP as we were talking about some of these projects. And the fact that right now, this year, some of the projects that we're working on are actually projects from last year. Oak Street is finally done. It was supposed to be last year. I live over by the fairgrounds. Boy, that's inconvenient. That was supposed to be last year. So I know that there are some projects that we're trying to get caught up on because weather and also sorts of other things occurred last year that did not allow us to get those things accomplished. And during that discussion, the comment was made, well, maybe if we could, and I don't remember who brought up the question, but somebody said, would we be able to maybe thin down a little bit of the mill in place and asphalt overlay projects in 1 year to free up a little bit of money for the 17th Street project? And then would we have the resources to boost that up a following year so that we don't fall behind? But so instead, we're still getting the work done within a 3-year period, if that be what it is. But we have the resources that we can do it so that we're not just not doing the roads, but that we're adjusting when those roads are done. What I'm seeing here is that instead of an adjustment, it's an added project. And that I find a little disappointing. But I think Mr. Wagner had some convincing things to say in his comments, so I'm not necessarily opposed to scenario one as it's being presented. The other thing, and I will speak for Ms. Spiros here because she's not logged in, but I see that this is something that was very important in her mind. The information about vehicles. All I see is information about 11 vehicles from Street Department. I don't see any information about fire department vehicles. I don't see any information about police department vehicles. I don't see any other information about any other department vehicles. And I think the intent was, do we need to replace all these vehicles? We have squads, we have fire vehicles potentially, we have wastewater treatment vehicles potentially, we have all of these vehicles that are slated to be replaced. And can we get any kind of information about all of these different vehicles to see if they're all necessary? And I am, again, only seeing street department. So I'm not seeing the fullness of information that I guess I was understanding when I went ahead and said, yes, let's do this. And I don't know if, again, speaking for Ms. Spiros right now, I don't know if she's going to be happy or is happy with what she's seen, or if she's expecting more information as well. So again, I'm a little bit disappointed with that. In addition, with the city garage thing, I do see that there are 5 new items. I don't know that that was really necessarily part of what was expected. If new items are needed, new items are needed. And if the budget's there, okay. But it's more the replacement items. Can we get another year out of a squad? Can we get another year out of a pickup truck that's used for department? Can we get another year out of whatever to try to save a little bit of money? Not that we're going to stretch a 3-year replacement plan to an automatic 4-year replacement. But in this current environment, with this current budget situation, can we, at least for a year, stretch just a hair more use out of some of these vehicles? I think that's about all that I have on all my little notes here, so I will yield the rest.
Thank you. Steve.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I want to first ask, what project did we add, Tom? You keep saying we added a project.
There's $1.076 million for a 17th Street project.
Well, that wasn't added. That was moved from 2023 to 2021. That was always in the 5-year plan.
Right. And what I just said was that I thought some of that funding was going to come from deferring some other projects to a slightly later time. So instead of maybe spending, and I'm just going to throw wild numbers out there, instead of spending $2 million on mill in place, we spend $1 million on mill in place. We spend $1 million on 17th, so there's your $2 million budget. And then the next year or the 2 years later, whenever 17th was slated to do, then we make up that extra $1 million by doing extra projects that year to make up for that. But again, that was my understanding or my thought.
Okay, let me take it from there then. A couple things first of all, and then I'll cycle back to that. The plan that scenario one that Dan put together, and he and I talked about it, I think was intended to do sort of what you're saying. I mean, we realized that $311,000 for the water main, that's not a critical improvement. It's not an immediate improvement. So we thought we could pull that back. There's nothing demanding that happen anytime soon. And then reducing the asphalt paving by, nearly $300,000 in 2021 and bumping it back to later. I think that goes along with what Tom Butke was saying earlier. I think, you want to see that work done. For 2021, I think we all agree that the asphalt overlay could take a step back because, doing a big project like East 17th Street sucks a lot of the oxygen out of the room. So, even though I might look at it and say, oh my gosh, we're going down to 1.5 million in asphalt mill and overlay. Well, we're also doing a significant project that's been delayed a number of years. So that's very acceptable. So that was kind of the basics for scenario number one. A couple of things, as far as cutting back, when I met with Dan, before Dan and Ed met, he and I looked at it, and I came into his office with the idea that we need to cut $600,000. And I actually had a list of some items, 30,000 here, 50,000 there, that I was throwing out to him that maybe we could cut in 2021. But he pointed out, and rightfully so, most of what I was talking about really wasn't real cuts. It was moving those projects back to 2022 or 2023. So over the 5-year period, I wasn't really saving money. I was just kind of deferring some stuff that maybe could be deferred a year or two, and it wasn't real savings. But I want to point you to one thing toward the end of Dan's memo, if I can. In 2019, when we adopted the 2020 through 2024 CIP, even taking out the $3 million for the aquatic center, the 5-year total of those projects was $19,551,000. What's on the table with either one of these scenarios is basically $17.3 million, a decline of $2.2 million over what was on the 5-year plan for last year. And that was done because we recognized the need to cut back. We certainly hear it loud and clear from Ellers, our financial advisor who worked with us on the 5-year plan. So, $2.2 million being reduced over the 5 years over last year, the 5-year plan adopted last year is, maybe you'd like to see more, and I get it. We'll do it, whatever you like. But it was something that took some work to get there. And, if you want to go farther, I just want it known that it's not that we didn't take you seriously. And as far as the vehicle replacement and equipment replacement, between June 11th and tonight, it would have been a hard time coming up with exactly the kind of plan you're looking for. I don't preclude it from even changing before the budget is considered this fall. But there really wasn't time to work, I don't think, with the police and fire commissioner who didn't meet during that time, and some of these folks to try and iron out what could be a modified schedule for vehicle replacement. I just wanted to put down that we're committed to looking at it and seeing if we can make some inroads, because I hear you loud and clear.
Thank you. Mr. Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to clarify one thing that, Mr. Butke, I agree with you. I don't like pushing things down the road on the street projects. And the way I saw this as going was we were eliminating about $300,000 worth of overlays, but we were inserting almost over $1 million worth of street project on the East 17th project, which this council voted on the council president's motion to push that up to next year. So I think Dan felt that it had to be in there because the council voted on it and the council was in agreement on it. So we're getting a lot of road, but it's just not the same ones. So that's the way I have to look at it. And having said that, I'll make a motion that we approve in concept of the scenario 1 as presented in Dan's memo.
There's a motion to approve concept number 1 for the 2021-2025 CIP. Is there a second? Mr. Witzel?
I will second. I will second the concept approval.
Concept. Any discussion? Mr. Butke?
Yeah, I was going to say, what does that mean?
Hit the mic.
What does that mean? Conceptual. I know what the term means, but it doesn't hold us to anything.
So in other words,
nothing.
So what it means is conceptually he's going to go back, and then when Dan comes to approve it, that's when everybody gets out their pens and whatnot, and we can go line items.
So you don't need this.
Correct.
Yeah.
You don't need.
But that is the thing. So it's right now it's just a concept.
So why do we need to approve it? But I got a couple other items.
Sure, please.
When Steve, when you talk about the 5-year plan that a year's down, one of the years is down 2 million. Remember, a 5-year plan changes every year. And I've been on this council long enough to know when we see that it's down $2 million, we can do some other projects then at that time. It's a fluid document, a 5-year plan, so I don't take much into it that it shows in the later years right now that we're going to have $2 million less because I've been here too long. I know what happens, and I'm not criticizing, but I'm just saying that that's not a true indicator.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Steve?
Yeah, let me go back to the discussion of the word conceptual, and you know, maybe I used that in a context that I knew what I meant, but maybe others aren't seeing it the same way. I really didn't intend that we'd come back in July and August and take out red pens. I meant that you couldn't actually look at a physical document tonight and, you know, in front of you and bless it, because you know, whatever comes out of changes has to go through administrative assistant positions, and they redo those pages. I mean, if your real intent is that you want to see a lot of these projects cut, you know, I agree with Tom. I'm not sure it does much. I mean, my goal is to try and give the, you know, the department heads, as they start working on their budgets here in the next week or two, the direction as to what would likely be included that they could plan on, and especially plan on the staff time required from engineering technicians and others to you know, to design and so forth. If there's a thought that we're just going to come back and red pen a lot of this, I'm not really sure we're gaining that much tonight anyway. I'm not saying that in any disrespectful way at all. I thought about it as being something close to the edge without signing off because you didn't have the document sitting in front of you.
All right, any further to Mr. Butker? I'm sorry, Nick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I was conceptually against the cuts last time when we met, and I'm going to be against this motion because conceptually I think that option number two is the better of the two. So I'm going to be voting against this motion.
Mr. Butke.
Yeah, I too will be voting against this because we got to go back. Mr. Witzel talked about it. We were promised information on the vehicle and whether we can, you know, what the maintenance is on this, if we can hold out another year. We were promised that. And I want that before I approve this.
Thank you. Anything further? Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, roll call vote, please.
Fire?
No.
Paschal?
No.
Rosendich?
No.
Bargander?
No.
Wagner?
Yes.
Witzel?
Yes.
Fisher?
No.
Butke?
No.
Hendler?
No.
Motion failed.
That motion fails. Is there a different motion? Nick.
I would make a motion that we accept option number 2 as a conceptual idea for.
Is there a second to that motion? Mr. Rosendich, any discussion? Seeing no discussion, please vote.
Fire?
Yes.
Paschal?
Yes.
Rosendich?
Yes.
Bargander?
Yes.
Wagner?
Yes.
Witzel?
No.
Fisher?
No.
Butke?
No.
Hendler?
No.
That motion carries 5-4. Thank you. Item N, overview of the 2021 budget process presented by Ron Almond, Finance Director.
Thank you. It's labeled budget process, really a lot of it, and usually I'm very bullet pointy, but I want to take a little time today. A lot of what I'm going to talk about is really kind of the lay of the land. You know, the situation we're in, some descriptive statistics of our funds, how we got there, things that'll work and not work. So I'm going to kind of go over just some a couple points on the audit, a recap of the TID issues, especially for our new members. Really to point out that it's a structural deficit. It's an every year thing. It's not a pay it back and we're good issue. Look at our tax rate history, our FTEs, alternative revenue options, and I'll try to save 20 minutes by saying we're not proposing any, we're not advocating any. My job is to inform you of your options and kind of what other communities are doing. Break down the general fund and those kind of things. And so this discussion is really, really heavy on general fund and debt service. We kind of lose sight of all the other things that are doing well financially in the city. Our TIDs, wastewater is doing great. EMS volumes through the roof. Marshfield Utilities is really strong. And unfortunately, we just have a budget problem in like the worst possible place we'd want to have one, you know, in the general fund where we're really restricted. So in the 2019 audit, what I wanted to point out there, you got a 101-page document. And so, the question I was waiting for someone to ask is, what does it all mean? Is it good? Is it bad? So 2019 was the year we found out, we had an issue, and we had actually budgeted a 1.7 million deficit that year. Collectively, between the debt service and the general fund, we came in at about a $500,000 loss, partially due to the sale of the building and some other things going our way. So not great news, but, for the first year that we really found out about it, it was better than expected. And I grouped the general fund and the debt service in all these discussions because the tax levy is intended to cover the general fund and the debt service. All the other funds have a funding source, room tax, wastewater fees, those kind of things. So a little bit about the TID issues, and I tried to meet with the new council and kind of go over this, but just kind of wanted to give you a descriptive of what it is and why it is. So best way to think of our TIDs and our enterprise funds is it's like they're a standalone business. Just ignore their part to say they should be a standalone business. They pay their bills, they pay their way, those kind of things. So when it came to debt, what happened was that the TIDs were not only paying their debt, but eventually a portion of the general fund's debt too. So if you think of an expense line, by nature, by cost of living, the expense line is going up 2% a year. And we have a long period of no tax raises. And what's happening was the TIDs were filling in that gap. So the tax rate's flat, expenses are naturally going up 2%. We keep funding it with more and more TID portion of it. We realize it and we stop. Now the problem is our tax rate is out of whack with our expense rate. And the number I put there, I calculated at the end of the budget, is our tax mill rate is $9.54 per thousand, and our general fund debt service expenditures are $10.04. So that's an annual problem. And why it's the worst place to have it is because general fund is so restricted. We've got levy limit, expenditure restraint. We're not in a high growth town, so it's kind of, you have to claw it back little by little. There's no silver bullet there. And the rule of thumb, and I do this in the budget, is when we look at the expenses, is, we've, over the years, my predecessor and I, and every other city's kind of moved just about every expense you can out of the general fund. You move it to a capital project fund, you move to a special revenue fund, you do everything you can. And we're kind of towards the end of that. So my rule of thumb is looking at the breakdown of our general fund, general fund expenses are going to go up 2.5%. Wages are 60%. Our health insurance is going to go up 8 to 10%. Everything else is 1%. So that's our planning rule of thumb as we're doing the budget. So we're still deficit spending in 2020 budget, not as badly. We're below our fund balance policy level. That's coming back. So issues 2 and 3 that I mentioned, one was the transfers itself. We paid that back. Issue 3 was that the general fund was borrowing money to fund these TIF projects for a long time. We made that adjustment. We have a process now for charging them interest, those kind of things. And oddly enough, those are the really, really big numbers, but it still doesn't affect the rates. It's an accounting, you settle up, we settle that up, and but it's not an annual issue. The fourth thing we weren't doing is, like I said, TIDs and enterprise funds are standalones. And there's a fair amount of administrative time between Josh, Dan, Steve, and I, and we never bothered to charge the TIDs for that. So we started that in 2018. We keep track, we look through our schedules. They pay an admin fee. In 2019, we went through all the legal bills because if there's a TID issue, the TID should pay their bill. So we have a little bit of backlog on those kind of things because I got the stack of legal bills from 18, 17, 16, 15 that are still recoverable. They incurred it, we just need to document and support it and those kind of things. So that's an ongoing process. The fifth issue we had is, unfortunately, in 2011, we designated TID 5 as a distressed district. TID 5 is our Mill Creek Business Park, just a picture of success, a great industrial park. But in 2011, we called it distressed, and we didn't gain any benefit from it, but we lost the ability to donor to other TIDs. Now it's it's got a great surplus, it's looking great. We could have used it to fund other TIDs, but we lost that opportunity. And probably issue 6, which I didn't put on my list, was the city never had the required audits of their TIDs. So during the life of a TID, you're supposed to have 3 audits. End of expenditure period, 30% of your expenditures, end of expenditure period closeout. So we never had the first 2 audits for any TIDs. So those are in progress for TIDs 4, 7, and 9. And our auditors are struggling because they got to go back, 12 years and try to recreate a lot of things. Hopefully we'll have those in a few weeks. I don't know what to expect there. They're digging, I dug, they have some different procedures. Really what I focused on was I went back and I rebuilt all the debt schedules and then said, what should they have paid? What did they pay? And that's what we squared up. So we'll have that as soon as possible. I feel when I look through it, I think the construction expenditures were appropriate, everything there. So we'll wait and see. So those are in progress. Before I move on, any questions on TIDs, structural deficits, those kind of things?
Who's hand? Mr. Wetzel? Mr. Wetzel.
Thank you. So we're getting caught up on TID audits. Do we have any estimate of how much more expensive it is to have them do this retroactively rather than doing it on time?
Yes. Luckily, they wrote in their contract at a flat fee. So
okay, good. Thanks.
The next one we might not be so lucky. It's $2,500 and it's charged to the TID. So in progress. All right. So next thing I want to talk about is provided some tax rate.
Mr. Wagner, did you have your?
I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Ed.
Go ahead.
Well, 2 things. Number one, I think I asked this in a email to you earlier today, and I didn't understand. On the front page of this thing, you're showing that we had a like an $18 million debt there that we had to pay back, and you said these are transfers in and out, and I see that some of the transfers came from the general fund. Was that fund just general, that $1,890,000? Was that from just fund balance that you transferred into that to balance it?
No. So
what was it?
Fund balance is a budgetary thing. We don't actually transfer it. On the front page of the audit report, what Ed's referring to is that in the general fund had a $1,890,000 transfer in. That's, I'd have to see what it nets down to, but the dividend that the utilities provides the city is considered a transfer into the general fund.
Okay, was that all in from one fund, or was that from a combination of funds, the 1.8 million?
That would be, the utility would be the bulk of it. I'd have to look at the schedule to see if there's anything else in there.
And then there's $1,285,000 from other governmental funds. What was that from? What other governmental funds?
So other governmental funds, all right. So other governmental funds are all the special revenue and capital project funds. So those could be, again, I'd have to look at the schedule. Those could be things like room tax fund, takes in the room tax, but then transfers it to a capital project fund for expenditures. Another item that's going to be in there is we started donor transferring in the TIDs. So TID 2 and TID 4 are able to donate. So it's a transfer out to TID 7. You should see a reciprocal transfer in from those TIDs. I'm guessing that's the bulk of it. Other than those things, we kind of go away from transfers as much as possible.
With those transfers, you were able to reduce the deficit substantially, or at least the fund, the amount of loss substantially. For on the bottom line of for the total fund balances, I should say. But the other thing, your issue number 5 on TID number 5.
Correct.
When we did that, there was almost nothing in that business park. There were very few things in that business park.
Correct.
And we were losing a lot of money on it, and we needed to we made it a distressed district so that we could make at the same time TID number 2 a donor district, and that way we could use that money to pay the debt service on it annually instead of levying for it as a separate tax. So that's the reason we did that.
Correct, but we never donated a cent to TID 5, and we had 4 more years before we would have had to have transferred it to a
Yeah, I think they
Distressed
were
district.
concerned about it. I think the city administrator and the finance people were concerned about it and made a very strong recommendation to the Common Council to do that.
Yep, and that's fair.
Thank you.
Yep. So just to recap that, so the transfers in the general fund are the utility dividend, and the other funds are kind of routine to and froms from there. So tax rates, I provide you with just kind of an overview of tax rates, and I highlight an area from like 2012 to 2019, which kind of describes the phenomenon I was saying is our expenses were going up, our tax rate was flat, and CPI increased, 13%, and our mill rate went up 3%. So that's kind of put us behind where we should be. And just to be clear, it was a revenue issue caused the problem. I'm not saying a revenue increase fixes the problem. There's a wide variety of things we can do to close the gap. So you can see we're about 5% below break even. And the second thing I put on there was what the breakdown of our rate is, because we kind of lose sight of there's other taxing jurisdictions that may raise it quite a bit, and the overall rate goes up, and our people at the front desk have to answer those questions too. So just, again, informational, some reference material there. All right. The fourth thing I put in there, just, and this is posted on the finance website too, we put it out there annually, just as kind of a summary of FTEs. Over the last 10 years, we've added 6 FTEs. We brought the communications department in-house. We added a few public safety, and actually the library declined. But in general, our FTE count has been pretty stable. All right. Again, this is alternate revenue, taxes, user fees, or what I put in my meeting with Steve, unpopular budget ideas. So again, this is just informational. We're not advocating this. But it was kind of interesting to listen to an Ehlers conference and see what other cities are doing. The main reason that cities are turning to this, again, is because there's so many restrictions on the general fund. And there was people at the conference that stood up, they're in a small town, they have no growth, they don't have naming rights, they don't have anything. So they're restricted basically to a 0% tax increase. So if they want to do anything, they have to look at some of these. So I grouped them, get through them in a couple minutes. So first group was things I didn't think were viable for the city. We don't have anything naming. We could name the world's largest round barn possibly, but not a lot of opportunities. Urban forestry charges in Madison only. Impact fees, special assessments, we use already were appropriate. Group 2, now this is an important distinction when we talk about user fees. Covered services is spelled out in the statute, and doesn't mean what you think it means. So if it's a covered service, it's listed in the statute. If it's not in the statute, it's a non-covered. So that's a different than kind of a common sense definition of what you think would be. So like street maintenance is not covered in the levy, according to this. So the covered services, what you can do with a covered service is you can pull it out of the levy because it's currently covered. You can pull it out of the levy and charge a user fee for it. Where cities that we're talking about have found this helpful is if they have a certain part of their budget that's going up 10 or 20%. They just can't keep up with the levy. So what you can do is you can pull it out of the levy. You have to make some adjustments to your levy limits. Then you establish a user fee that covers that specific service. And what it does, it eliminates your upside risk of, that particular item really causing problems with your budget. So I give an example there of what it is. And all these things that are user fees, obviously it's just another charge. But what it's doing for these cities is it's pulling expenses out of the general fund where they don't have any other options, or it's putting revenues into the general fund where they don't have options. A lot of these require, some kind of fair and linked methodology, some staff time, and a billing mechanism. So again, we're just kind of at this level, kind of explaining what there is. So the next group is non-covered services. So these are things that are not listed, and that's a pretty wide group. The example they gave was a streetlight utility. Streetlight costs are not a covered service. So what some cities have done is they set up a separate enterprise fund. They gather all their streetlight costs, direct and indirect, and they add a charge for that, and that charge covers that fee. So it pulls expenses out of the general fund, you have a separate fee, and it nets to zero. So again, you need some kind of methodology that's fair, residential, flat fee, some kind of thing. The other one that they talked about, and actually the league just came out with a memo on this one, it's called the transportation utility. And the premise is that, a business or a location that's generating tons of traffic or heavy traffic pays more for the road services. And this one is really not complicated, it requires a lot of data. The number of trips, the weight, those kind of things. Anyway, long story short, it comes up with a fee depending on how many trips your business generates, or impervious surface, parking lot space is used sometimes. Kind of a burdensome thing. The one person that stood up, he said why they did it is they had a huge nonprofit in town. And so even though they're tax exempt, they're generating a lot of road traffic, and through this method, they could recover some of it, whereas otherwise they couldn't. The last one, and I don't have a lot of information on this because this just came out June 16th. The league mentions a street maintenance user fee. And what I got out of that so far is it's just a simplified version of the transportation utility where it's just a flat fee, you charge it. Again, it's pulling expenses out. Obviously, we're increasing the cost to residents, but the fourth one, and this is the one that I know it got voted down here at some point in the past, but this is the one that most people stood up and said they were considering or had switched to. And the reason they're doing that is because of all the things they need. It's not a covered service. It's a simple charge methodology, and the state takes care of all the billing and everything and charges you 17 cents. I mean, so this was, one guy called it the glide path, unpopular, obviously, but they pass a resolution, tell the state how much they want, they get a check. I give a couple examples. Madison, and they stack. And that's kind of the unfortunate thing about this, because a city, a county can all add it on. And the examples of Madison just added $40 city on top of $28 Dane County. Let's see, anything else there? No, and then I included the number. I talked to the county, and there's 31,517 vehicles registered in the city of Marshfield as of the end of last year. So that's just, again, informational, quick overview. Any questions on those before I go on to the next spot?
I don't see any.
All right. Okay. I've got everything here. Oh, one thing I meant to mention during the transportation utilities, the league memo from their reports, they say that state aids cover 16% of city street work, and it's a declining amount too. All right. The last thing I gave you is I kind of gave you my rule of thumb for the general fund to give a breakdown of the expenses in the general fund. And as you'd expect, the things you expect from city services are the largest part of the budget. Public safety, public works, parks and rec, library, about 83% of the budget. And likewise, personnel is the largest part, whereas personnel costs are, for any year, 2/3 to 70% of the entire budget. So again, just reference material when we start talking about, where we're going to cut, what we're going to cut. It's just kind of good to know how it's all structured and what the makeup of these things are. All right, so now down to the actual budget process. All right, so a couple years ago, we changed our process. You used to be able to submit anything you ever wanted, put it on, the first, and Steve would tell me that the first round of budgets would come in millions of dollars over, and there'd be an article in the newspaper, and we don't do that anymore. So what we do is we limit the first pass to this: finance inputs current staff at current rates, the health insurance, and then we have, for everything else, we have a nominal increase. So we call it the cost of living budget. take last year's budget, these adjustments, and then anything else needs to be approved before it goes in. So you're stuck with last year. If you have a different project, you got to cut something out and get Steve to approve it to move it back in. So we really try to limit that, and that's where I'm hoping, at least the first pass, we come at kind of a cost of living and then look to go from there. CIP we talked about quite a bit tonight, but the general concept at the beginning was that we're going to borrow less than we pay off each year, and I think we're heading there. Another general rule that I put in the finance budget, in the budget packet was for non-general funds, we do not want to spend down fund balance at this point because we're deficit spending in the general fund and deficit in the debt service fund, and we don't want to pile on top of that and spend down on top of already deficit spending for our calls because we already got a credit downgrade. We got to at least maintain our cash position best we can till we can get through this. I think that's everything I got. So the budget is kicked off. Our forecasting software is open. People are actively inputting their projects. And as soon as we get some finalization on CIP, those will roll into there. And we will continue to work on it. Any questions for me about anything?
Mr. Hendler.
Thank you, Ron. Questions I had, number one, you mentioned how close are we to our borrowing capability and the rule that this council set? How close are we?
Sure, I got that. You got a second question? Well, I looked that up. I brought that with. So the state rule is 5% of equalized value, and the council rule is 65% of that number. So if you just state it as 65% is the limit set by council, we were at 52.2% at the end of 2019. So dollar-wise, we have about $11 million before we get to the city limit, and we've got about $40 million before we get to the state limit.
Okay, thank you. The other, if I may, the other questions I have, when we had these people here to tell us about the audit, one of the things that the individual mentioned, which kind of led me to believe that would be worthy of a question, that was the retirement fund. They consider that a liability. Are we underfunded? Things moved out or underpaid?
Yeah, I'll have to look into that a little more, but no, that's not the case. What ends up being, so we don't touch it, so we pay in our part, the employee pays in their part.
Well, that's the part I'm talking about. Have we paid what we're supposed to?
Right, we pay, they pay. Any liability, and I can pull out the sheets from the audit, are likely an actuarial assumption of future investments because the money goes into the retirement fund, is invested, and there's a lot of actuarial assumptions about return rates, retirement, longevity, those kind of things, where they calculate those kind of things.
Well, the reason I asked that, we saw transfers from the TIF district, and when he mentioned the word liability, the next thought came to mind is we underpaid our obligation to the state.
No, as far as I know, we pay at every payroll, and we always have and always will. I don't even know if it's an option that we cannot pay it.
Well,
well,
yeah. Well, thank you very much, Ron.
Yep,
good job.
Any further questions for Ron?
I think Tom's got one here.
Mr. Witzel.
Thank you. It's a comment, not a question. In your email, I appreciate the bold text in item E, the not proposed. You start talking about alternate funding for sources or alternate revenues, and I think a few of my colleagues probably perk up and say, yeah, let's implement a wheel tax. But a tax is a tax, and alternate revenues in my mind are taxes, and it's money that we as a government entity are telling our citizens they have to pay. And I don't care how you try to roll it in powdered sugar to make it look better, it's still a tax, and I will continue to oppose those kinds of things. And I appreciate the fact that your email here, whether it was intended or not, has that nicely bolded that we're not proposing that at this time. Thank you.
Correct. And, you know, it is my job to inform you of options. You know, with the situation we're in, there's no silver bullet. You know, I group our three unpleasant options into, we do something that's bad for the city, which is continue to deficit spend. We do something that's unpopular with citizens, which is raise taxes, defer projects, defer maintenance. Or we do something unpopular with staff, which is cut benefits and cut those kind of things. And unfortunately, that's the situation we're in.
Anything, Steve?
Yeah, I think adding to Tom's question and sort of to Ron's answer as well, we just felt you need to know these. They're out there. With respect to the wheel tax, the Board of Public Works has actually brought this up on their own and talked about it twice in the last 3 or 4 years and decided ultimately they didn't want to go there. So, I mean, yeah, these are things you need to know, and some of them are less onerous, if you will. A couple of the things that Ron went through tonight are really reallocating charges from the general fund to other ways of covering them. And ultimately, you know, without working out all the details in front of you right now, it'd be really where citizens are paying for them, in effect, one way rather than another, as opposed to a tax increase. It would just be shifting or offloading, if you will, some charges that are currently on our general fund that really hurt us with respect to our property tax levy and some of the state regulations as well. So we just felt that, you know, Ron went to this conference and we felt you needed to know all the things that are being out there that are being done and talked about by other cities.
Thank you. Mr. Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ron, the term that I'm sure makes some people very nervous that you've used a few times tonight is deficit spend. And you're talking about, well, we're deficit spending, and to some extent you imply that, you know, we got to quit deficit spending. There is no way on God's green earth we could supply the services for a city this side on the general fund levy limit that we've got right now. I mean, there's just no way we can do that. The only way we can do that is to shift stuff into long-term debt because we're incentivized to do that by the state, the way the state says that we are frozen on our general fund tax or levy limit, but there's no limit on debt service. The sky's the limit. And that's basically every year sitting here looking at the budget, I groan every time we have to go through this because there is no other way to provide services to our citizens other than to borrow money. The trick is to keep it under control. And that's what I was trying to do by the original motion back earlier in the night. But I think it's not deficit spending, sir. It's survival.
Thank you. Anything further? Nope. All right. Thank you, Ron. Item O, request to approve appointment of Lyle Lang, 800 South Marinol, to the Economic Development Board to fill a vacant position. This term will end in 2023. I'm presenting this, and you have a copy of email sent by Lyle, and a lifelong resident of Marshfield, and he owns a local business. I think he'd be a great candidate. On this, there's no recommended action at this time. And there's no urgency there, so it'll be back on for your approval on the July 14th meeting. If you have questions on that, I'm happy to take. Mr. Butke.
Does he live in town, Mayor?
Yeah, lives over on Marinol.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I did see that. Sorry.
Yep. Any other questions? Nope. All right, item P, adjourn to closed session under Wisconsin Statute Chapter. I'm sorry, Mr. Witzel. Oh, okay. 19.8518, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require closed session. Possible assistance for a development project located within TIF District Number 5. Renewal of lease for space at 2nd Street Community Center, the Job Center, and closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute Chapter 9.851C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. City Administrator performance review. Motion, is there a motion to go into closed session? Motion by Mr. Witzel, second by Mr. Rosendich. Roll call vote, please.
Fire,
Yes.
Paschal,
Yes.
Rosendish,
Yes.
Margander,
Yes.
Wagner,
Yes.
Witzel,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Butke,
Yes.
and Henler.
Yes.
Thank you much. We are in closed session and we'll take a 5-minute break.